The very first scientific study they did with C60 in humans is they actually put it in a cream and they found that it reduces lines and wrinkles in Japanese women and on the face. But it wasn't really, people didn't really understand what that was doing. But there was a scientific study where they were doing rabbits and they gave rabbits, C60 is an antioxidant, very powerful antioxidant. And so one of the things antioxidants do is they get rid of inflammation. So they gave rabbits arthritis and then they injected C60 into their joints and the inflammation went down, which is, not surprising. That's what to be expected. But when they examined the joints afterwards, they found that actually the cartilage had regrown. And so that went to other studies. And so I won't go all of those studies because it would take a while. But basically what they found is C60 stimulates stem cell growth.
Welcome in, I'm Kimberly. Welcome to the Journey to the New Earth. I'm so excited about today's guest because we're going to be talking about the exciting new changes we can start looking forward to here on the planet. If you're new here, I hope you'll consider subscribing before you leave and make sure you click that notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. And if you want to keep track of what's going on the planet, you might want to sign up for our Friday morning email newsletter. The link is in the description box down below. Every Friday morning, we send out a very short, very sweet email newsletter featuring all the things that we think are important going on the planet. It's very handy, it's very free, it's very fun. Link is in the description box down below. In today's toxic world, taking care of our health is more important than ever. One of the natural solutions I've integrated into my routine is the benefit of mushrooms. And the go-to place for me is Birch Boys. They are without a doubt one of the greatest resources for mushroom products on the planet. Made in the USA, sustainably sourced, and run by an absolute wonderful entrepreneur, Birch Boys has become my go-to for natural health solutions. While they have a wide variety of mushroom products, the two that I use every day are right here. First, I use the ChagaNOW, which is a wonderful mixture that I put a tiny little scoop in my morning coffee to support my immune system. Chaga is one of the most effective immune support compounds on the planet, and this is a super way to get it into your daily diet in an easy-to-use formula and very, very effective for immune system support. And if you're looking for clear thinking, I can tell you, you'll be surprised at the effects of lion's mane. I use this lion's mane tincture, 1 teaspoon every single morning, and the difference in the clarity of my thinking is extraordinary. I was actually really, really surprised. Birch Boys has a whole lineup of mushroom tinctures. Make sure you check them out when you're on the website, but I'll tell you what, these are my two favorite, and I use them every single day. They are absolutely a quality company built on integrity. Go to birchboys.com and use the code NEWEARTH for 20% off your entire order. Birch Boys mushroom products, I think you're going to love it. And with that, I'd like to welcome in Ken Swartz from C60 Purple Power. How are you, Ken?
Oh, glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm so glad to have you here as well because I am an avid user of C60 and am seeing really incredible results. But I wanted to kind of start from the beginning with you and find out, how did you get involved in this element, and kind of give us the story of how Purple Power came around.
Well, it was I was actually working on the Metal Oxide fusion reactor project. And the problem with that is there's a lot of late professors and dead PhDs associated with it. So I didn't want my crew or myself to end up in that category. So I went researching a radiation protectant, and I came across this stuff called carbon-60. That's nickname is C60. And it's a little carbon molecule, 60 carbon atoms shaped like a little sock. They basically did an experiment where, they gave one set of rats got C60, the other didn't. They hit them with a fatal dose of radiation, and the C60 rats lived, whereas the control rats, of course, passed away. So so that's when I learned about that. I got a couple sources of C60, and we took it, and we're all still around, by the way. So it worked for that. But what really caught what really caught my attention is, well, first off, I kept using it afterwards because I had a little bit more energy, better mental focus, and the afternoon blahs you get when you eat lunch kind of went away. And but what really caught my attention is about 7 months after I started using C60, I went to see my optometrist and for my annual checkup, and my DRUs, or dry macular degeneration, which I'd had for years and was slowly progressing, had completely disappeared, and it remains gone today. And so that was a really a big plus. But it's just one thing. It could be coincidence. In the meantime, my electrical engineer on the job, Gary Rodriguez, he had developed severe wet macular degeneration because he had type 2 diabetes, and which is a contributing factor. So I made a preparation of MCT. I learned how to make it in MCT oil. That's medium chain triglycerides. And for those people out there, medium chain triglycerides can be turned into ketones by your liver very quickly. And ketones act as like flex fuel for your cells. So if they can't run off glucose, they can run off the ketones. So he took a tablespoon of that a day for a little over a year, and his severe wet
Oh, you're freezing up. Doggone it.
went completely away. It still got, and his type 2 diabetes went subclinical.
That's so interesting. And I want to talk about my results from C60 as well. And then I also want to get into some other sciencey stuff. So make sure you guys stick around for that. Did you notice an improvement in your eyesight, or was it the health of your actual eyeball that were the results? Is your vision better for you?
Oh yeah, that's actually one of the things we actually did a study on that. We've never published it, but we did a study with a research PhD, and we got approval from the medical board in Colorado and did the whole thing. And it was actually all the examinations were done by a licensed optometrist. And we originally people were thinking that C60 was reducing their cataracts, and so we wanted to research that. But what we found out is it didn't really seem to reduce the cataracts that much. But what happened is it all improved the optical nerves of all of our things. So everybody in the study had increased vision. And we figured it now that it's actually improved and that's in the optical nerve, which is what macular degeneration is. Macular degeneration is actually, part of the brain. That's the retina is part of the brain. So any cell type with a lot of mitochondria, this C60 acts as an SOD, superoxide dismutase catalase mimic. It passes the gut barrier, the brain barrier, goes into your cells by endocytosis, then into your mitochondria by endocytosis, where it acts as an SOD catalase. And those are like two critical antioxidants that make your mitochondria run real well. So when your mitochondria health improves, then your optic nerve improves, or your brain improves, or your cells, your endocrine system, or your muscle cells. They have all of those cells have a lot of mitochondria in them.
Yeah. So I haven't noticed a change in my vision, but I haven't been back to the optometrist yet either. And I think I've been taking it for about 3 or 4 months, but it'll be interesting for me to see hitting the 7, 8, 9, 10-month mark to see what happens with that. I want to talk about what's happened for me, because I take a lot of supplements. I do, because I know it's in the food, in the water, in the air, and that sort of thing. It's like is a full-time job, not being poisoned anymore. So I started with the C60 in coconut, in the MCT oil, and I tried the olive oil. What I'm finding, and this is really curious for me, Ken, and I wonder what you have, is that I started taking the gummies because Clip High had said that there was something about the pectin in the gummies that seemed to increase the energy boost from the C60. And that seems to be the experience for me. Have you heard anything about this, or is there any reason why I would find a little bit more energy boost from the gummies?
Oh yeah, the pectin, and also make it in whole coconut oil. We use whole organic coconut oil and pectin. And so the whole coconut oil has the MCTs in it, but it also has longer chains. And so it's like just really good fuel as well.
Okay.
So getting the C60 plus some really good, because coconut oil is fully saturated, so it goes pretty much to energy running the body. It doesn't go to fat, and so that's kind of why it helps a lot. And I think the pectin and that seem to increase the quickness in which C60 seems to operate. But it's about 1.5. The gummy's about 1 serving. If we were younger, as we get a little older, we need to take a little more C60. So for you, it'd be about 1.5. You need like 1.5 gummies for a full amount.
Yeah, and what you could do is you could take one gummy and then maybe a little bit
Yeah.
later in the day you take a half a teaspoon of the oils. All right, I want to move into the skincare line. And I shared this with Ken before we came on, and some of you may know this and some of you may not, but I have a whole other YouTube channel that focuses on skincare for mature women. And so I know skincare back and forth. Ken, here's what's happened for me. And I didn't share this with him prior to us coming on. I was taking the oil, the oil. I wasn't using the topical skincare. I just started using the topical skincare a few months ago. And the thing that I noticed, and I don't understand this, and I wonder if you can share that what you think the mechanism of action is that all of a sudden my skin started looking different. And here's the thing, I know skin because that has been what I've been doing for the last 5 years. And I would look at my skin and just be stunned because the texture of the skin was completely different. And what it appeared to me is that the junctures were tighter or something. In other words, the way the light refracted off the skin, and not just the skin on one part of my body, but it's like the same on my legs. So it really was surprising to me. And that was just from taking the oil. And then I started using the skincare, which your team sent to me. Thank you very much for that. And I am stunned at this. And what I said to Ken is that when the skincare industry catches on to C60, it's going to be wild. One thing I want to tell you, and this is for the ladies that are watching, you guys stick around, it's going to get interesting for you in a second, is there's the anti-gravity serum and then there's the eye cream. And I've been using both of these. I have used a ton of eye creams in my 5 years. Nothing really works. Nothing. This really works. It's the same thing. It's like the junctures in the skin are tighter. It's really weird. So tell me why that is and why would I be seeing such a dramatic difference? This is the only under eye cream I've ever used that I can say, oh yeah, that really works.
Well, it kind of goes, actually, the very first scientific study they did with C60 in humans is they actually put it in a cream and they found that it reduces lines and wrinkles in Japanese women and on the face. And but it wasn't really, people didn't really understand what that was doing. But there was a scientific study where they were doing rabbits and they gave rabbits, C60 is an antioxidant, very powerful antioxidant. And so one of the things antioxidants do is they get rid of inflammation. So they gave rabbits arthritis and then they injected C60 into their joints and the inflammation went down, which is, not surprising. That's what to be expected. But when they examined the joints afterwards, they found that actually the cartilage had regrown. And so that went to other studies. And so well, I won't go all of those studies because it would take a while. But basically what they found is C60 stimulates stem cell growth. And it does
Okay.
this by, there's things called senescent cells in your body. They're like zombie cells. Their DNA is damaged. Usually the body has ways of taking them out, like apoptosis, right? But they sometimes they just want to hang around. And so these senescent cells, they go into the fermentation mode and then they start making alcohols. They're in the fermentation mode, so they poison the cells around them, and that's a real problem with aging. And what C60 does is C60 goes in those senescent cells and restarts their mitochondria. And when the mitochondria restart in a senescent cell, they'll send messages to the nuclear DNA, the main DNA in the cell, and they won't get the right message back. So they kind of blow themselves up and cause apoptosis, which is programmed cell death. So it wipes out all these zombie cells in your body, which is causing problems and diseases. And then it stimulates stem cell growth. So what happens is you get like a huge increase in stem cells. We've had like a 70-year-old. He goes in to get stems. He's been, doing stem cell treatment regularly. He goes in to get stem cells. And then they come running out and say, what are you doing? You have now have stem cells levels of like a 20-year-old. And so that's what happens. After you see 60 for a while, it causes apoptosis in these senescent cells, wiping out the zombie cells in your body. Then you get a huge increase in stem cells. And so when your skin turns over, it's stem cells that help that happen. So now you have more cells in your skin as you turn over, so your skin is thicker and healthier, and the collagen connections are stronger. And so literally, you're getting thicker, healthier, younger skin through using C60. It doesn't happen right away. This takes several months for the whole process to begin, but that's essentially what is causing that. And it's not just in the skin because that's the ectoderm, which is the outer part of the body. So it not just fixes up your skin, it also will fix up your gut because your gut is actually skin cells. They're the same type of cells, ectoderm. And so a lot of people who have gut problems who take C60 will find that their gut problems go way down because there's more stem cells so that their gut cells, which are part of the skin cell line, turn over better. There's more of them. And so your intestine works better. Yeah, and you get less problems and inflammation in digestion as well.
Yeah. It really is amazing. I mean, I could tell just the difference in my skin before I even started using the topical product. So it's a stunning thing, and I'm sure that the medical profession knows all about it, right?
Well, some do. It's pretty much in the alternative healthcare thing, and functional medicine doctors know about it, and the biohacker doctors know about it. But your average MD has no clue.
Yeah.
He's a pharma critter, and he hasn't discovered C60 yet.
Yeah, my doctor didn't even know what I was talking about, which I thought was pretty interesting. Yeah. I do think that, once the broader skincare industry catches on to this, it's going to be huge and it's going to be wild. This makes me wonder who first discovered C60. I know that it's not a compound, it's an element, it's a naturally occurring element. So, how was the whole discovery process like, and how do you get C60? How do you formulate it?
Okay, it was discovered by Richard Smalley, Robert Croto, and Harry Small, I think. And there are three researchers. And I should grab those out to make sure I got the names right. But anyway, these three, Harry Croto is like the main guy that did it, and it actually was solving a long-standing mystery in astronomy. There was actually something in outer space absorbing in the infrared band. They called it. It was called DIBS, diffuse interstellar bands. Something was absorbing in the infrared bands between the stars, but what could survive? It had to be a molecule because the band was so wide, but what kind of molecule could survive in outer space? And so there was a whole bunch of research. Now, Harry Croto thought that it was probably, C60 because but he had to prove that. And so there was a whole process that they did. And it was in 1985, they managed to prove that it was this never before known substance that thing. But what's interesting is it basically, you remember Buckminster Fuller?
Mhm.
Well, Buckminster Fuller actually predicted this molecule would be discovered and would have medical benefits in the 70s. This was like, I don't know, decades before it was actually found to have these medical benefits and discovered. And so actually the scientific name of C60 is Buckminster Fullerene.
Yeah.
So it's Harry Croto and that knew about that. And Richard Smalley knew about that. So they named it after him, and it solved that in 1985. They discovered it, and then they got a Nobel Prize in 1996 as a and so that's kind of that. So the three guys got the Nobel Prize for it, but it wasn't really until the early 2000s that there was testing done because it was really hard to make. We actually, yeah, and so some of the famous Botry study is they had these what they're called Wistar rats. They're kind of wimpy rats that they kind of characterize human aging in rats and humans. And so they actually gave it to the Wistar rats and increased their lifespan by 90%, which was a real
Wow.
surprise to the researchers because they were figuring it would have the opposite effect. And then eventually from that they learned for other studies they learned it was a superoxide dismutase catalase mimic. And it basically completely prevented, in other studies, it completely prevented cognitive decline and cancers in aging in these Wistar rats, which is usually what happens to them. So they just lived a really, really long, healthy rat span until they hit the end. So really, C60 is great at increasing your health span, not just your lifespan, but your health span, because you know what good is getting old if you're just going to be decrepit in a wheelchair. So C60, these rats, they didn't get cancers, they didn't get cognitive decline. They just lived a really, really long rat lifespan. They did another study in mice, and that's where they discovered it increased the average lifespan of wild type mice. So this is more like characteristic by 11%, and there was no cognitive decline at all during aging. So that's really important.
So, have they done studies on humans?
They really haven't done many studies on humans. A lot of the studies, you can't do certain. Well, first off, it's obviously you're not going to do a lifestyle study on humans, even though people are taking it. We could do a meta study or something, But they've done a lot of studies on cell lines, human cell lines. So they take the cells and they put them in there. They did like human skin cells, and they found that C60 prevented damage from UV radiation. And then they also did with human nerve cells. They put them in the test tube, and they found that they gave those, they had two sets. They had controls, and then they had the C60 ones. And they found that the nerve cells with C60 were protected from a whole bunch of neurotoxins, which is not surprising because, that's part of their retina. So the cell line studies are the main ones that they have on humans because you can't do certain studies. But they found that C60 is, it helped better regulate the release of histamines in human mast cells. And that went to animal studies where they found it prevented the cytokine storm that would happen. But there's a website people can go to. It's called whatisc60.org. And that's a 501c3 that our company and other C60 companies support, because we can only put humans type studies up on our website, right? So animal studies, because the FDA says, we can't. And by the way, C60 is not approved by the FDA. It's not designed to treat, cure, prevent, or any sort of disease.
And we're not doctors.
And we're not done. I am not a medical professional. Yes, I am a research scientist. So just
Yeah.
letting you know that. And so you can go there and you get all the animal studies. And there's a little synopsis about the study and a link to it. So you can go. And so they're just all kinds of amazing studies with animals and human cell lines primarily. I mean, there is studies going out there with people, but they've had really good. There's one for post-traumatic stress syndrome soldiers, but that one hasn't been published yet.
Okay. What's the manufacturing process like?
Well, this is one thing I should probably talk about. We use sublimated C60. And sublimated C60, you guys, sublimation is like a cousin of evaporation. It's when a solid turns into a gas, then back into a solid. There's no liquid phase like evaporation. And so all of our C60 is sublimated. Now, most C60 out there, and with most of the companies, they produce it through the solvent purification method. And that's when they dissolve it in methylbenzene, a known carcinogen. And then they use a process, eventually they bake it off, and then they'll get their C60, but there's always a little bit of methylbenzene, which is in that C60 product. So we always look for a sublimated C60 product. We're not the only company that produces sublimated C60 products, but we're one of the few. Most of them use solvent-based stuff. And also you want to use the high purity. We use 99.99% pure, which is the highest purity kind of stuff you want if you're doing human consumption, right? Because the nature of sublimation, because it's like evaporation, it's like distillation, it makes for a very pure product. So if you see like a 99.9% product, that's probably a solvent-based product. Sublimation by its very nature makes that 99.99 or 98% pure product. And so you always want to look for that. And also one of the things also that we do, we also, all of our oils are organic, and we have COAs that shows that are organic oils. And we also do third-party testings. And either in our boxes or on the thing that goes on the outside of our box is we have a certificate of analysis where all of our products go to third-party vendors where they test it for purity and concentration, so that there's no microbiologics, and you can actually see the concentration of your C60 in the product. I think we're the only C60 company which actually does third-party testing, so that that our products are safe and effective.
Yeah. Are there other applications for C60 than internal use, or
Oh yeah, there's gobs of industrial things. They have ones for like a lot of those flexible solar panels. They're like based that you can put on like things. They use C60 as a semiconductor in those panels. It's like it holds charges if they dope it with like other substances, and so it can hold charges. And so there's a bunch of some people. It's actually used to help. It's like little ball bearings. They could put it in internal combustion engines, and you could put like your C60 in your internal combustion engines, and you'll notice it'll run a lot smoother. And so there's a whole bunch of industrial applications. And C60, by the way, is the largest thing they've ever. I don't know if you ever heard of the wave particle experimentation. C60 is the largest thing they've ever made a wave particle. They bounced it through it's tunneled through a barrier. So It's the largest wave particle duality substance they've ever done testing on. So it has
Yeah.
all of this amazing. It's got like 100 million quantum states or something. So
Wow.
it's part of the reason why it's such an interesting a molecule.
It really is. What do you see as the future for its application?
Well, I see it all through the healthcare industry and in
Hmm.
agriculture and especially animal agriculture because it can replace a lot of antibiotics. So instead of giving
Right.
your animals antibiotics or people antibiotics, you can give them C60 because C60 helps strengthen the immune system and just makes it work better. And they've have the cell studies that shown that it's assisted, in even human cell studies that it's assisted in resisting disease. It just makes the because one of the things is, there's basically four antioxidants that are like super key to your mitochondria health. And your mitochondria, they're little organelles in your cells, and they're the ones that make the energy for your cell. Like 97% of all the energy in your cell is made by the mitochondria through the Krebs cycle. And so C60 is there's basically four antioxidants. You got CoQ10, right? You could
Hmm.
supplement for that, and you should. And then there's glutathione. There's some supplementation for glutathione. Basically, the topical type glutathione applications are the best. I could get onto that. So that's something you can supplement for. But there was really nothing for superoxide dismutase and catalase, which are like the two key antioxidants for the mitochondria until C60. Now C60 is a mimic. It does the job of both. It's kind of unique because in our body, your mitochondria are like little furnaces, and furnaces make waste products, right? And one of the things they make is a thing called superoxide, and that's an oxygen with an extra electron. And oxidative damage is your body rusting. So an oxygen with an extra electron is the most rusty thing you could possibly have in your body. And your body, of course, makes superoxide dismutase and catalase. And what superoxide dismutase does, it turns superoxide into hydrogen peroxide. Then catalase comes and turns it hydrogen peroxide back into an oxygen and a water. Well, C60 is kind of unique. It's in fact the most unique molecule in chemistry. One of the reasons they got the Nobel Prize is that like almost all molecules that like to have a positive charge do it by releasing an electron into the environment, right? But C60 actually pulls positive hydrogen ions from the environment inside of itself, and that makes it positive. So like superoxide, which is negative, will stick to it, and then C60 just pulls the electron off, gives it one of the hydrogen ions, which turns to hydrogen gas, and then the oxygen just goes back to a regular oxygen, and then C60 just pulls another hydrogen ion. It also neutralizes hydroxyls, the second most damaging oxidative radical in the body. And superoxide and the hydroxyls are not used by the body as signaling molecules. And those are the only two things that C60 interacts with. So C60 doesn't interact with, let's say, nitrogen oxide or hydrogen peroxide directly, or there's a bunch of signaling molecules in your body which are actually oxidative radicals. And they're usually based around sulfur, iron, and zinc. They're lower energy ones. C60 does not interact with any of the body's signaling molecules, so it actually has no toxicity at any level. And if you go to the whatisc60.org, you can actually see the study. Because usually when they found for all the medical studies, whether it's humans or animals, the concentrations like 0.1 milligrams to 0.2 milligrams per kilogram of body weight, right? That's the thing. But they wanted to tell, and what level is C60 actually toxic? So they took it up to a gram per kilogram of body weight. That's 10,000 times the health beneficial dose. Now, if you did that with vitamin D or vitamin E, it would probably kill the critter. They did it with C60 and it had no toxicity at all. And that's because C60 doesn't interact with any of the body's signaling molecules. It just interacts with the superoxide and the hydroxyl ions, which the body doesn't use as signaling molecules. And so it has really and it's also the only antioxidant which increases athletic performance, which is
Wow.
another people. If a lot of athletes, we have a lot of athletes that use our products. In fact, there's a few that have gone from mid-pack to champions in their field, but I can't say any names.
Yeah, and I'm not surprised at that. I mean, the difference in the energy, the focus, the clarity, all of that is really extraordinary. And I think we're probably just on the cusp of people catching on to what a powerful ingredient. Is it difficult to manufacture to get it into the form that we need it in?
Yes, it actually is. C60, high purity C60 by weight is more expensive than gold. And
Wow.
the way they make it is I mentioned how Harry Croto, and Richard Smalley and Robert Curl discovered it in in the outer spheres. It's made in like lightning strikes, like the burnt wick of your candle is like 0.255 0.25% C60. But to make it really high purity, they kind of make it the way it's made in the atmospheres of giant red stars, which is why it's like out in outer space. And giant red stars are like our sun. When our sun runs out of helium, runs out of hydrogen to burn, it's going to burn helium into carbon. So giant red stars are really rich in carbon, and they get really hot, so their outer atmospheres kind of boil away, and which are really full of carbon. And so when they boil, about 0.1% of that turns into C60. So we do the same in the lab. Basically, we have like a chamber that's like maybe a tenth the atmospheric pressure of Earth, but it's full of helium. And we have two carbon rods, and you put them together and you run a big electric current through them, and it vaporizes them into like basically a dust, a powder, molecularized powder. And if you do it right, about 10% of that carbon will turn into C60.
Okay.
And that's kind of easy to do. Then the purification process is the hard part of it. And that's where we, of course, use sublimation, where you basically take the ashes with the C60, you put them in the sublimator, you heat it about to 400 degrees Celsius, and the C60 will turn from a solid into a gas. It'll float to the other side of the sublimator, which is cooler, where it condenses on some plates, and then you scrape the C60 off, and that's how you get 99.99% pure C60. And then the other method I mentioned was the solvent-based method, but we don't do that, and you really don't want a solvent-based. So if you ever hear oven-baked or ESS or supercharged or something like that, you're basically listening to a solvent-based C60, and you don't want that. And we're not the only person that use sublimated C60 in their products, but just make sure you're getting a sublimated C60 product, and it's 99.9% pure.
Yeah, and thanks for clarifying that. That's where,
99%.
yeah. And we have a discount code in the description box if you want to try it out. I can highly, highly recommend it. It's really phenomenal. And I do think that it's going to just become quite the thing, which, more people start catching on in probably the medical profession, and then they'll want to regulate it. So
yeah, so
we don't know if we would.
Yeah, it's kind of work. It's actually a lot of patent C60. It's found in nature, but what they've done is they've attached ligands to it. So they've actually taken C60 and then they'll attach a ligand and then to a pharmaceutical. And like if you look at a lot of your pharmaceuticals, it says HCl at the end of them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's hydrochloric acid because it'll pass through your stomach, right? And then get your intestines. So they've actually found C60 does the same thing with the ligand and the medicine. So they've actually taken out gobs of tens of millions of dollars in patents on C60 with something attached to it, and then you can do that because then that's something made in the lab. So
right,
so
yeah.
So we're kind of in a unique place because they can't really ban C60, because if C60 is bad, then they'll lose all this money on the patents they've already made.
But that's an important point right there.
Yeah, so C60 is a pristine C60, a natural substance can't be patented. So we're kind of in a semi-protected zone, right, where we're at.
That's good news. Let's go ahead and move forward. I know that you are, I want to say you're in the thick of it as far as new technologies and really dramatic changes in how we're going to be doing things on the planet and how systems are going to change. Do you want to move into Moxy fusion now and kind of talk about that?
Oh, sure. Yeah, Moxy fusion. This is all about Cliff High and the woo science, but it's really part of decentralization, and that's where it all started. Is metal oxygen fusion. It was actually metal oxygen fusion was discovered by some Osawa and Kushi. They basically made a sodium street lamp bulb, but they put like sodium in there, an equal amount of oxygen, and an pressurized argon atmosphere, and then they turned it on, and it was a real ceramic cause. It's going to get hot and it's going to get pressurized. And they put it was a ceramic with steel around it so it doesn't blow up, and with a little quartz window, and through the quartz window they could see like the yellow orange glow of a sodium street lamp, right? But over several hours it actually turned into purple. And they found that you can fuse metal and oxygen, any metal and an oxygen, with a pressurized argon or other noble gas moderator, like 1 billion times easier than they do with that fusion where they're trying to fuse like deuterium and tritium together. And so here I got a little on the other thing. So basically what they were doing is, I think you can see that okay up here. Mm-hmm. What they were doing, they're taking sodium and they were fusing with oxygen and making potassium, because that sodium street lamps all of a sudden started turning purple. And that purple light is from sodium, from potassium. When potassium is in a potassium street lamp, they don't use them because they glow like this purple, right? Which isn't too useful for driving at night. But so they took sodium fused it with oxygen to make potassium. What we did is sodium hydroxide is kind of toxic, and potassium hydroxide not so good either. So we took deuterium, which is a hydrogen isotope with an extra neutron, and we fused it with oxygen, and it made fluoride 18, which then decays into oxygen 18 and releases a little bit of energy. And that little energy you could use like in a fusion reactor to boil water, run steam, and and uh, and do that. And so that's basically what it is. We basically for under $20,000 produce an over unity fusion reactor.
Okay,
And
define over unity for those
that
who
means you get
don't
more
understand.
energy out. You get more energy out than you put in.
So
And I
we're
mean,
basically talking about free energy or 0 point energy. Is this
well,
correct?
it's not free. You got to build the reactor. You got to put all the
Mm-hmm.
parts. But you get it's like sunlight. Solar panels are quote free energy because it's coming from the sun for free. But still, if you've ever put solar panels in your house, you know it's a little expensive. So it's not
Right.
quote free, but the energy source is yeah. And so because argon, our atmosphere is like 0.9% argon. You just go down to the gas store buy stuff. Deuterium, about one out of every 7,000 hydrogen molecules is a deuterium isotope. It's got an extra neutron on it. So it's basically you can take it from water and air, and you can basically make energy, and it's decentralizable. If you go like to, I guess I could give you links. Is because there was actually I don't know if anybody's heard of Stanley Meyer.
Yeah.
The water, yeah. That's
The
well,
car.
I was giving a talk about Moxy fusion, and this guy came up to me who actually worked with Stanley Meyer when he had his over unity. What did his over unity car run off? It ran off deuterium water, heavy water, which is what we were using, and argon gas. This mysterious. He was using a neutral gas. He turned an internal combustion engine into an over unity Moxy fusion reactor. Okay, that's what Stanley Meyer. That's the water car. It wasn't running off water. It was running off heavy water and argon. And when the gas bottle went down, it wasn't over unity anymore. So argon acts as a moderator. It's kind of like if you wanted to grind corn, you got to have a pestle and something. And so argon kind of causes the whole thing to rise. And I had a paper. I got some over there. If you go look up, you just go online and look up Moxy fusion, Moxy fusion, and then type in ResearchGate, and you can pull up my paper and a paper up there. One of the things we've open sourced everything because Osawa and Kushi came up with this stuff back in the late 1950s, early 1960s. And I had read about it decades ago, right? When I was in the right time, at the right time, at the right place, the right people. And really all we did was reproduce Osawa and Kushi stuff. We didn't come up with it. And we just confirmed the Osawa and Kushi stuff. So we posted our paper on ResearchGate back in 2014. And another group, actually, the Scotia group out of Scotland, Scotia group with the University of Valencia in Spain, actually redid our experiments. Except instead of when we did our third-party verification, we went down to TSA Systems. The same on the weekends, TSA Systems has like really good radiation detection stuff. So we would go down to TSA Systems, which makes all the detection stuff for the airport, so that people aren't sneaking nuclear weapons or radioactive stuff. But when they're the weekends, we knew Ted, and he let us in there, and so he was doing third-party verification of our stuff. But we used a multi-band spectral analyzer. We have 50 spectral bands, right? And we were doing that. But the Scotia group, actually, they didn't have access to something like that. That's like $500,000 of stuff, right? So they actually got these glass bead detectors, which can almost detect individual elements of like ionizable stuff. So they basically redid our experiment, but they used these glass bead detectors, and then when it was running, all you could see was hydrogen, right? And oxygen. And then they'd turn their reactor on and there was gas flow through, and then they would see the appearance of fluoride. So the Scotia group and the University of Valencia pretty much verified our study, right? So we verified the Osawa Kushi, experiments that they were real, and then the Scotia group and the University of Valencia verified that what we did was real. So
Yeah.
it's like triple and quadruple. And now there's like, I've been putting this Moxy fusion stuff all over. There's like tens of thousands of downloads of our paper, right? And there's people doing it all over the world. It's like, and that's part of the Stephen Greer thing,
Right.
which I probably should talk about.
Yeah, and go ahead and talk about that because I think that that's probably very important and it's the wave of how things are going to go for the future.
Yeah, I can give you some of the links in this stuff. But well, Stephen Greer, after Stanley Meyer died, right? And then he had a twin brother that did the electronics. Stanley was more like the mechanical guy. But they kept it going, and I think the twin brother died, and then the family, wanted to sell off the stuff basically, because they weren't, the next generations weren't really researchers. So what they did is they're going to sell it off. And Dr. Stephen Greer, he's like a UFO, new energy kind of guy. And what he wanted to do, he wanted to buy all of that stuff, and then they were going to do an open source research group where you'd actually have live cameras all the time, and every discovery, everything that was discovered would be open sourced immediately as it happened, right? Well, he raised a bunch of money, but it wasn't enough. Instead, some group from Britain actually had more money, right? So they ended up with the stuff, and they actually moved it to a bunch of some research place somewhere in the Midwest. And then it was going on, and then the story, and I'll give the links to you on this stuff the people can go, because I went on Jeff Rent's. He's like an alternative thing, and he made a little web page for me and put it up on Rents, and so you can go there and see it all. But basically, Stephen Greer was like 6 months to a year, I can't remember, after they had taken the stuff and done the research. Or one of the financier guys was an American, gave Stephen Greer a call, and the guy was almost crying because one of the scientists had called him that was doing the research in the Midwest, and he said that he was the only scientist that was still alive. All the others had been killed, and he was running for his life. And then the guy hadn't heard from him for 2 weeks, and so he called Stephen Greer and told him what had happened. And Stephen Greer talks about this online, and then he hasn't been heard, and nobody knows really what happened to all the equipment. So they basically just rubbed him out because it was a threat, energy supplies or whatever. So that's one of the things we did. Is so we knew about this stuff, right? And we knew all that. And Osawa and Kushi back in the 60s, early 60s, right? We could have had working fusion reactors by the early 1970s. So there wouldn't have been a Chernobyl. There wouldn't have been, a Fukushima. There wouldn't have been all of that stuff. There wouldn't be a carbon crisis. All of that stuff would never happen because we would have had this technology like 50 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay, but it got suppressed. So when we did our confirmation, we put it up on ResearchGate, which is an open source free thing. So anybody can download it, and tens of thousands have downloaded our paper, and probably the Scotia paper as well. So, and this is something that just basically anybody could do. And oh, by the way, the thing on, remember I talked at the very beginning of the talk, I talked about how there was a lot of late professors and
I know, I was going to say, you must be doing something right because you're still with us.
Yeah, well, one of the problems is what they were doing in that cold fusion. You remember Fleischmann and Pons, right? In that 1989, they had that cold fusion stuff, and it was really big for a while, and then the hot fusion guys crushed it and all that. They said they couldn't reproduce it. Well, basically, Moxy fusion is what cold fusion is all about. And unfortunately, what was happening for those guys, basically what happened is they were using platinum or palladium electrodes. And so for that cold fusion stuff, so what happens is when you have platinum electrodes and you Moxy fusion them in the electrolytic cell with oxygen, you produce radon gas. And then because these were electrolytic cells, they were venting into the laboratory air. And sometimes they use palladium and oxygen, and that would make a radioactive xenon gas. So these cold fusion, because a lot of these cold fusion, Dr. Shoulders, the Dr. Bass, Dr. Fleischmann, and they're past now, because basically they were doing this research and they were venting, the cells into the laboratory air. So imagine, breathing air hundreds of times the worst radon basement you could imagine. And you're breathing that air for weeks and weeks and months and months. And so naturally, of course, they died of cancer. And another thing is, which is very important, and I figured this was going on. So, and I think I got my paper here. Just a second here.
Okay.
One of the things that we did is when we were doing this my paper has this is an example. This is what these guys did. Some guy finally put those, the radon detectors you put in your basement.
Mm-hmm. They
use this little P39. It's like a resin plastic, and you might see a couple little dots there. That's before it was put on one of those Fleischmann and Pons electrolytic cells. You saw a couple dots there. This is what it looks like after they put it on the electric cell. You can see all those little holes.
Yeah.
What happens alpha particles when they hit this little plastic, they punch a little hole in it, but they're molecules, right? You can't really see them because they're so tiny. They're little atoms. But when you
Hmm.
put it under hot sodium hydroxide, it like etches out where the hole's been punched. It kind of makes a weakness, and so you can actually see the number, and so you can see just the insane amount of radon. It was pretty,
Yeah.
and so that's what happened to Fleischmann and Pons. In fact, what happened is, when that 89 came along and they announced it, and then it was really popular for a bit, and then the hot fusion guys was cutting into their action, right? It cost $1 billion. They spent $50 billion trying to do hot fusion, and they failed. We did it for under $20,000, right? We actually did it over Unity, right?
Yeah.
$20,000. Anybody can do it. You can turn an internal combustion engine maybe into a metal fusion. See, this is something anybody can do anywhere. It doesn't require huge amounts. And the thing that really, I guess, got the, see, here's our part. The other thing is it lowers the Coulomb barrier too. So you see where that the white thing and the black thing before, we used X-ray plates because usually when atomic stuff goes on, it lets out in the gamma ray band, which is really high energy. But because metal oxygen fusion lowers the Coulomb barrier, that's the energy level that it takes to fuse stuff together, is so lowered it comes out in the X-ray band. So these guys were walking around with Geiger counters looking for gamma rays all the time. They were X-raying themselves. I mean, when we turn that sucker on within a minute, who knows, 30 seconds, that plate is soaked, right, with X-rays, which is why we were
Hmm.
using C60. Then we have a 20-foot
Yeah.
turnaround. So we turn it on. We got like a 20-foot, we get away 20 feet, we turn it on and we jump behind some stuff, and we had cameras and stuff doing it. So it was actually, yeah, it's kind of hazardous if you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah, I would say so. Let's kind of zoom out, Ken, as we start wrapping up. What I'm wondering, because you're in the thick of this, and most of us are not. What major changes do you see in the systems that we have right now based on what you're seeing in your world? Like what do you think we're going to start seeing that is so dramatically different? In other words, can I take the car that's in my garage and retrofit it with this application that you just described? Is this something that's doable? And how do you think these changes are going to really start presenting themselves in the day-to-day world?
Well, what's happening is the decentralization of technology. That's what's really going to happen. Right now, technology is like you got to go to your gas station, right? You got to fill
Right.
it up. You got this, there's this whole, or you got to plug it into the giant generator somewhere. Well, a lot of suppressed technologies are basically decentralization technologies. Technologies which are hard for big corporations to make gobs of money on and hard for governments to tax, right? So they've
Mm-hmm.
always been suppressed. And this Moxy fusion is just one of dozens of these types of technology. And it's the same way. It's like with cryptos. You're going to go for DeFi, decentralized finance. Where because like right now, like, Bitcoin is basically nobody uses it for transactions. I'm sorry. They use Monero, which is it can't be traceable, right? You can't trace Monero. So if I do, like if you're on the deep web or you're doing some transaction, I can transact with Monero, nobody knows who the transaction was. It can't be like when you do a Bitcoin transaction, that transaction, if I do it there, you could see my Bitcoin wallet, all the money that's in it, and every transaction I've ever done, and I'll see whatever transaction, whatever, you send somebody a check and they know everything in your account for the rest of the time, right? And the government can do the same thing, right? So this DeFi, distributed finance, distributed energy, distributed everything, decentralized everything, so that it can't be, it can't be. That's what McAfee was getting to. He was going to actually
Yeah.
on the bottom of your cell phone, was they were actually going to put an attachment, and so your cell phone can now communicate with everybody else's cell phone and store, and so you would have like a decentralized cell phone system where you wouldn't need cell phone towers because everybody's cell phone would communicate with everybody else, and would also, and it also eventually end up, because you'd have extra storage, you could actually have like a decentralized, they already have these decentralized internet where you don't need, servers and all that. So
Yeah.
that's a whole lot of things. And so that's what we're really seeing. You're going to see this breakout of decentralized energy. And this is not the only energy thing. This is just one. In my thing, you can't really do it because when the argon runs out, the whole thing breaks. But if you were to like close circuit, a closed loop, like take the exhaust, which is argon, and heavy water, right, that hasn't been burnt, and you just put it in a condenser, and then you run the argon back through the air intake, and the heavy water that condenses is put in the fuel injectors, and then you attach an electrical generator to your internal combustion motor. Now you've got a Moxy fusion reactor making electrical energy in your and so now you have electrical generator that can run off. Where's the energy coming? Basically, it turns every gallon of seawater into 30 equivalent a net of 30 gallons of gasoline once you pull that deuterium. So how much seawater is there? A lot of seawater.
There's a lot of
Yeah,
seawater.
and if each seawater has, yeah, so you're basically you have, and anybody can do this. Any nation could do this. Any industrial thing can do this anywhere in the world. So they don't need, you don't need oil wells. You don't need that kind of stuff. And the other thing,
Okay, this is what confuses me about this whole process. And maybe I'm missing something, which I may well be. It seems to me that the first country that implements these new technologies is going to get so wealthy because it's going to be so much more efficient and less expensive to do everything.
oh, it's happening right now. That was the whole thing. I mean, we basically gave this has been downloaded. We know it's happening. We know a half a dozen major nations which are doing research into Moxy.
Yeah.
Okay. And lots of private corporations, and like the Scotia Group, right? That was just a private guys out of Scotland who got together with some guys in University of Valencia, and they redid our stuff, right? And they proved it was real. And the other thing that really kind of does this, while I've sent the links, is this is basically they've been doing, my paper is like 7 examples of Moxy fusion. Here's one from Yorye and Carrillo and this is one where they basically took tungsten oxide and they Moxy fusioned it, and that thing called AU there is gold. So they basically produced, Dr. Bass, you can basically produce gold and other precious metals for under $100 an ounce
Yeah.
in input costs. Now the machine to make it is pretty expensive right now, but as time that will go down. And so it's the same thing. The input costs are virtually nothing. I mean, Dr. Bass, the late Dr. Bass, was converting thorium into two isotopes of nickel, no, isotopes of tin and copper. Unfortunately for Dr. Bass, he didn't realize he was also producing a radioactive noble gas, which is why he's the late Dr. Bass. Yeah, Moxy fusion is, you got to know what you're doing. Otherwise you'll Madame Curie yourself. But
Yeah.
take your C60 and vent your stuff, and yeah, because
And who would have thought that science was such a high risk profession,
yeah, it
both
is.
in the lab and when they find out what you're up to?
Yeah,
So
well, that's research. You don't know what you're doing.
yeah, it seems to me that what we're looking at right now, because I just keep hearing little dribs and drabs from people like you, that there is so much being done quietly,
Mhm.
kind of in little labs and little garages around the world. I'm wondering if it's going to be, slowly at first and then all at once, and everything changes within a 12 to 18-month period about how we do everything. Is that a
Yeah.
scenario that you think is feasible?
Oh, I think something like that will happen because, this is just one of many of these technologies. Moxy fusion is just one of many. And so and these they've been around for a while and they're out there, but now it's kind of coming to the fore. I don't know,
Yeah.
there's been like a change in the way things are happening. And so there's going to be this, and there's all kinds, C60 is kind of in that same category, where here's this substance, it's been around for a while, and now it's suddenly people are realizing all of its health benefits. And but there's other things too. I mean, that's just one. I mean, there's a lot of like frequency medicine,
Yes.
which has always been suppressed, but it has, incredible benefits. And there's
Hmm.
a variety of frequency, what people call frequency medicine.
And the start of that is red light therapy. I mean,
Oh yeah,
that's the
that's huge.
beginning of it. And I've got a red light use every single day. I had a voice in my head, Ken, probably 20 years ago, and I don't know where it came from, still don't know, that said, there will come a time when surgery will seem barbaric.
Hmm. Oh yeah, I think yeah. There's that yeah, prevention is the key.
Hmm.
And then when I want to talk about C60, it's not a magic pill, folks. If you want to get good
It's as
health,
close as I've found
yeah.
as
But I
far as
mean,
skincare
yeah,
goes.
it does. But you see, you've got to have. I mean, you got to go to the other. You got to eat healthy,
Yeah,
and you got to supplement because a lot of our agricultural
it's
food has been
poison.
mined out. And yeah, you want to stay away from the glyphosates. You want to eat that organic, healthy
Yeah.
food. You got to drink clean, pure water. So you got to almost purify it yourself. You got to stay away from EM radiation, which is a whole nother problem, and
Hmm.
get the exercise and the sleep. I mean, it's just C60 is just one toolkit one tool in the toolkit for good health.
Yeah, but I think that anybody who's going to be looking at C60 is very, very clear that you don't eat
Yes.
you don't eat certain things and you don't do this, because there's a growing awareness that our entire world is a toxic mess right now. Easy to clean up once things get changed, but right now we're in a bad space. So what I can say is thank you so much for your time today. This has been fascinating. I love the science, although it's way, way over my head. It was great to hear from somebody who knows what they're talking about. And I would love to have you come back maybe 6 or 8 months down the road and we can look at the changes that we're seeing on the planet based on the work of people like you and others around the planet that are really making a difference in this decentralized new environment we find ourselves in. And if you're thinking about C60, what I can tell you is do it. It's amazing. I take a lot of supplements. This is the one I absolutely won't give up. And if you are a female and you are looking for better skin, I can tell you the skincare is really pretty amazing. I haven't found anything like it. So thank you, Ken, for today.
Well, thank you for having me on. I look forward to coming on again and talking about more interesting things.
Yeah, this was fascinating. Thank you, and thank everyone for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye now. I hope you enjoyed this video. Coming up next, this is a good one, or you might really like this one too. Either one of them could be perfect for you. Before you leave, don't forget to subscribe.